Welcome to the show. It's IB Nation Sports Talk. We're up and rolling, along with Vince D'Addario, Sean Stiers. You are dressed a little bit nicer than I thought you would. Did you have a snow day today, or did you go to work?
Oh, I was at work all day.
Okay.
All day long. And
I thought everyone had a snow day in the area from what I saw this morning.
In the city. The outskirt, communities all had either a delay or whatever, but Mishawaka, Penn, Elkhart, we were all in school for some reason. Of course, the roads got worse as the day went on, so it wasn't actually that bad going to work. Coming home was a little bit different. I actually got a compliment on my outfit by my wife today, so I feel pretty good about it. So got the navy blue dress pants, some snazzy blue socks. Feeling
Fancy Vince.
I'm feeling it today.
Vince.
I know.
Wasn't wearing, the school polo and all that.
No. I went a little bit, more, salesman look, I think.
But, by the way, no offense to your new employer.
By all means.
But after somewhere around, how long did you work for the school corporation? Somewhere around 15 years, maybe something like that?
I think it was exactly 15. Yeah.
Very odd to see you, out,
embracing,
trumpeting pen things. And,
I know. You're not wrong. You are not wrong, because until you're on the inside, you have to hate. And I did with a passion.
I know they pay your bills now, but it's still very odd,
I know. You're not wrong, and it is very odd to see certain things hanging in my closet and having the allegiances that I do now. And I think it all started for me, though, when my son started to participate in athletics, and I was still pretty staunch.
He was even there. Yeah.
I was staunch last year. I didn't get anything. I refused to buy apparel, and I would actually go to the events wearing Riley gear.
I bet that went over well too.
Yeah, I was that guy. You know what I mean? And so
here's city trash in here.
Yeah, pretty much. So, I have pictures of myself at the sectional championship with my son, arm around him. He's wearing the full, gear, and I've got my Riley stuff on. So,
right.
I am loyal to a fault, baby, wherever the paycheck's coming from.
Well, you're neutral today. You could wear neutral stuff still, or wear something Notre Dame for that matter.
It is true. I have worn the pullover you got me to school before.
Oh, okay.
When it was warmer out, because it's short sleeve, but
right.
I have worn it.
Good spring pullover.
Yes, 100%.
Well, before we get going with the mailbag today, when I see we've already got some good questions going, a couple things. I don't know if you saw this come across your email inbox today, but we're going to get a couple media opportunities with some of the new players coming up, which is very exciting.
You want to talk about completely different from the last regime.
Yep.
Okay. Completely. We're going to get a day with all the transfers, which is awesome. And then we're going to get a day with all the early enrollees. We're just rolling them out.
Yep.
Ask whatever you want.
A week from Friday, February 3rd, we get the 4 transfer guys. And then a week after that, February 10th, we get all 12 freshman early enrollees.
Shocking.
So,
I opened the email. I was like, whoa. Because the title of the email was media availability for football. And I was like, well, what's there to be available? What's going on? I click on it. Shocked. Absolutely shocked. So, and Decaf 18 says, I still hate Penn after 30 years out of high school. And I don't blame you, Decaf. I do not blame you at all. I will also say that I coached or taught at every South Bend high school at one point or another.
Yeah.
And I had true hatred.
Middle school.
Plus middle school, right? Yeah. I had true hatred for the other South Bend schools while I was at a different South Bend school until I donned those colors, right? So It's all about where your loyalties lie, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Derek says I'm calling you a traitor. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going that far, but at the same time, it's like, considering you did work for all of the South Bend School Corporation schools, it's like one thing they all have completely in common is everybody hates Penn. If you're not at Penn,
rightfully so. Believe me, rightfully so. It's the kingdom. It is. They have a lot of advantages that the other schools around here just don't have. We can get into that all you want, but it is. It's not fair at times. You know what I mean? The Northern Indiana Conference, which is the conference that all the South Bend schools in Penn reside in, right? They go from Penn High School and Elkhart High School as the biggest, right? At about 3,400 kids, all the way down to Bremen and Marion and St. Joe at like 500, 600 kids. It makes no sense. No sense whatsoever. Now, Marion and St. Joe, you can kind of explain away because they're Catholic schools. They can do some things a little bit differently. But the Bremens, the John Glenn's, the Jim Towns of the world, those schools are tiny in comparison. It's just not fair.
Hard to see them in the same conference, all these small towns, when they decided to merge the conferences. And of course, they've got divisions and all that kind of stuff. It's night and day different, but there's no other school the size of Penn.
Right. They're a big fish in a small pond. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. Their competition generally comes from the DAC, the Duneland Conference, and then, frankly, South Indianapolis schools.
Right. All right, well, hit the like button if you would, and of course, subscribe, rate, review, leave a 5-star comment if you're listening on the podcast channels. We do appreciate it.
And I know this is not what anybody really wants to hear, but Tommy Guns is asking how many schools are there? How many high schools are there? City isn't that big. There are 4 South Bend high schools that are part of the South Bend Community School Corporation. There's one school named St. Joe that is a private school. So those are the 5 in Catholic South Bend.
Yeah.
Those
then, of course, you've got Mishawaka High School, which is, neighboring, not in South Bend. But in terms of South Bend itself, 4 public high schools plus the Catholic school. Then you've got Mishawaka, Marion, the other Catholic school where you went. And then right outside of that, you've got Penn High School.
Yep. And Penn is technically in Mishawaka as well. So
which is weird.
Osceola is literally like across the river. Yeah. And Granger is like, 100 yards in the other direction. So, but I think there's, I want to say 13 NIC schools. So there's 13 schools within the conference. So anyway, it's enough high school football from the area, folks. But although if you throw a mailbag question in, and we'll answer it.
All right, well, let's get down to it. Brass tacks, it's mailbag time. Let's answer some questions. John, how hard is it going to be for Notre Dame to get down to 85 scholarships by fall? We're at 94 right now, right?
I was actually going to double check to see where Notre Dame was right now. I was going to look at Brian's scholarship chart article that he has, which is generally up to date last time I checked. And I thought...
I know it's right around that number. I haven't.
It's a little over 90, I believe. According to his article, they have 91, and it was last updated on January 19th. So that was 6 days ago. So I think that's about as accurate as you're going to get. So 91, that means they got to lose 6. They're going to be way under that. I don't think that that's going to be a problem in any way, shape, or form. I think you're going to see some transfers that we already we don't know about, but some guys that I would anticipate transferring.
Right. We expect depth type guys to leave
100%.
Still.
100%. I think there's going to be a couple injury scholarships. They go on permanent, injured reserve. And so they get to keep their scholarship, but they're not part of the 85 anymore. And then I think there's going to be a couple of kids who just become regular Notre Dame students, and they're just not a part of the football program anymore. And so I think they're going to be under the 85, and I think that's going to allow them to hit the portal again.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The question is, what will they do portal-wise once some of this stuff happens in May when the portal opens back up again?
I think that they're going to still be in somewhat hot pursuit of a defensive tackle. There's talk of, depending on how the spring goes, if they're going to look at a guard potentially. an offensive guard.
I don't get that.
But I don't
with
get
all
that
the guys
either.
they've got on that line. Like, I mean, literally, it's like there are 20 guys in that room almost. It's like, what do you need to go out and get another guard for? They did that a couple years ago. It didn't work out,
Yeah. It shocks me that would be the case. And I think there's a lot of talent in that room too.
Yeah,
especially at the guard position, because I think they've kind of over-recruited guard and maybe under-recruited tackle, if I'm being honest. So, or at least interior.
Well, it's where you're going to see a difference in Harry Hiestan's recruiting philosophy, because and I used to talk about this when Jeff Quinn was still here. Quinn would go more like he would recruit actual interior linemen, whereas Hiestand, by and large, I'm not saying there weren't exceptions, but he would typically like get, you played tackle in high school, but he would also find guys who would, project to the interior positions and that kind of thing. So he was getting a lot more tackles. It's basically find the best guy and then find a way to get them on the line once they're here. It's kind of like, again, I've used this analogy before in baseball. Typically you go out, you recruit all the best shortstops.
Yeah.
And then once, like if it's college, for example, once they get to college, maybe one of them becomes a first baseman. Maybe one of them becomes an outfielder. Another moves to second base, that kind of thing. Get the best athletes and then figure out where you're going, where they fit in once you get there. So I think we'll see more of that with Harry Hiestand going forward, kind of back to what he was doing previously.
Yep, I completely agree. And from what I can gather as well, the 24 class isn't super strong on offensive linemen, period. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of haul they can bring in. There's not a ton of scholarships that they've offered out there on the offensive line, but numbers-wise, I think they're fine, there. But yeah, as far as getting back to the question, they're not going to have any problem getting down to 85. I think they'll be down to like 81 or 82 when it's all said and done at the end of the spring. And so they're going to be able to hit the portal if they need to for whatever they feel they need to hit it. And I think they'll have the ability to offer, some scholarship opportunities to some walk-ons. I think that's a possibility as well.
Yeah. I concur. I see all kinds of questions.
I know. There's a ton of good ones, actually.
Yeah.
And some goofy ones, which I like. I'm in a
that
mood.
That one was from John. I don't think I've ever seen Josh Buffalo, the motivational business banker.
Oh, yeah.
Before. So we'll throw
Josh. I thought he was a motivational business speaker before. Now he's a banker. I don't know what's happening.
Okay. All right. So he says, projecting Hartman as the starter, what's your prediction for passing yards and touchdowns this season? Also, who will have the most receiving touchdowns this season?
Oh, man. That's a loaded question.
Big predictions. Right off the top.
All right. Let's see here.
Because we know I guess I won't say we know it's not going to be a tight end, but we know it's not going to be Michael Mayer, who basically held down all the receiving stuff the last couple of years. But
I would be shocked if it's a tight end. I mean, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Now
but that's what makes it hard to figure out, is because there's so many other guys with, some with a little more experience than the other. But who's gonna elevate and become the true alpha?
Yeah.
I think that's the toughest part of this question.
Yeah, and so going back to Sam Hartman, his stats the last couple of years. So 22, he had 3,700 yards, 38 touchdowns. 21, he had 4,200 yards and 39 touchdowns. In 20, he had 2,200 yards. So he doesn't have the running game, or he didn't have the running game.
Don't forget he missed some games.
Right. No. Absolutely. Yeah, 2020, I don't even really – the last 2 years, 37 and 42, I think is what we have to look at, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And he had 38 and 39 touchdowns respectively. So he didn't have the running game that Notre Dame has. I mean, they're going to run the ball more this year than he's ever had. I think that goes without saying. I think a successful season would be about 3,500 yards. So that would be lower than the last 2 years, and about 35 touchdowns. I think that'd be fantastic. I think that would be exciting. If I was putting the over under, I'd probably put it at like 31.5, something around there. I mean, gosh, if he hits 38 or 39 touchdowns, I think that's amazing. Okay. I just want to temper my expectations a little bit. So I'll say 3,500 and like somewhere between 32, 35 touchdowns. I think that's a safe bet. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with that ballpark. That's what I'm thinking. Like Ian Book had over 30 touchdowns in his best season. So I agree with what you're saying. Notre Dame is still going to run the ball, and that's going to be a big part of it. So that'll take up some of it. And the other part of it is, will Tyler Buckner to some extent be involved, like potential red zone? We don't know that that's going to happen, but it could happen if you're going to keep Tyler Buckner, kind of part of things. So I think at least 32 touchdown passes is pretty solid. And I was going to say 3,500 yards for him. In terms of the touchdown leader.
Oh, that's so hard.
I know. I'll just go with Jaden Thomas because of the returning guys, he was the most productive of this receiving group. And like found the end zone a couple times with his size and everything. And so I think that he could potentially be a guy who Sam Hartman comes in with right away and maybe kind of has that connection. And, I think, we've all talked about his production potentially taking off this year. So it's almost like throwing a dart at the wall because, again,
I don't think there's a wrong answer.
There's so much inexperience. I think I think you could find just about, you could make a case for just about any of them.
I think you know what? I'm going to probably take a safe pick here, and I'm going to go with Caleb Smith, the transfer, just because he has all of that experience. Yep. And I think he and Hartman will hit it off pretty quickly. Caleb Smith is used to not having great quarterback play, and now he's going to have it in Sam Hartman. I think Sam Hartman's going to look to a veteran. I mean, not that he's not going to look to the other guys. I feel like he's going to be real comfortable with a veteran guy that he knows is going to be able to make plays for him. So again, it's shooting a dart, man. I don't know what the answer is going to be. I'm going with kind of a safe pick, I think.
Yeah. Bill Walsh, not a 49ers fan, Bill. He wants to know, would you take a Heisman bet for Hartman if you got 10-1 odds? I don't think I got 10-1, and I made a bet. I got plus 3,000 odds on him to win the Heisman.
10-1, 10,000? Is that what it is? Is that what I mean? I don't know what my betting. I don't know how this works.
I think that's what it would be, wouldn't it? Plus 10,000. I'm so bad at that part. I know what plus 300, plus 3,000 means, but I would. Like Vince and I are kind of, the same philosophy when it comes to the wagers. Neither one of us throws down huge chunks of cash, but for a little bit of money, if you get good to one, good odds like that, like, you bet 10-1. If you bet 10, you get $100. I like that. You bet 20, you get 200. I would take those odds.
Oh, I would too.
That's an easy bet, and even if you were to throw down $100, if you were confident enough, you get 1,000 out of that. So sure.
I put a bet down, not on Sam Hartman, but I put a bet down on Notre Dame winning the national championship in 23 already. It was plus 2,500. Why not?
Why not? That's right.
I don't bet a lot of money, and it's literally swinging for the fences. I figure, what the heck? So I'm looking right now for the Heisman Trophy.
Thank you, Elijah. By the way, 10-1 is plus 1,000.
Oh, okay.
I got even better odds than that.
Yeah, you did. You got 30-1, buddy. Yeah. That's and last time I checked.
Well, Logan says 10-1 is plus 900, plus 3,000 is 29-1. Okay, I'll take
whatever. It's in the neighborhood.
I'll take your word for it. Either way, got pretty good odds.
It's in the neighborhood. He had the 6th best last time I checked to win the Heisman Trophy. Okay. I mean,
he opened at plus 3,000 after, I think it was after the transfer. He opened, or he was at plus 3,000 anyway. I don't know if he opened at that, but after the transfer, he was plus 3,000. And I think within a week, it went to like plus 1,500 or something like that. So,
okay.
I think a lot of people like those plus 3,000 odds. So if you're like me and you were lucky enough to get in on that, congratulations.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I would take it though, and I'm looking for it. I don't even know how to search on here to find odds or I'll look later.
Yeah. Lucas, could a linebacker lineup of Colley at Rover, Bertrand at Mike, and Kaiser at Will be effective with Snead and Leofau rotating in for depth and or certain packages?
Yes.
So you've got Colley at Rover, Bertrand at Mike, Kaiser at Will.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be very effective. I think moving Kaiser inside is a good idea. I think a more athletic Colley would do a good job out there. I think, maybe even him and Snead, kind of having a rotation out there. Maybe Snead also gets a little bit of Will. I have no problem with that. I think that we'll see what they do with Leofau. I think that's the biggest question mark with this question is what they do with Marist. I just don't know how they feel. Like, we see what we see, the fans see what they see, the coaches see what they see, and I think all three of those answers are three different things.
Yes.
And so
exactly.
I'm very interested to see what the spring looks like, to see where Marist is rotating and if he's starting and all of those different things. I really am.
They obviously continued to feel pretty confident in Leofau, or at the very least that he was the best option that they had for a good chunk of the season based on his play, his playing time.
Right.
Now, when it comes to actual production, that's another thing. And I agree with you. Like, I know that you didn't like the move of Junior Tui Alamaka to Viper. You would have rather seen Leofau there. And I can't say I completely disagree with that, but
what do I know?
I don't know. Maybe we'll see in the spring, because they've already got a history of cross-training these guys at different positions. So they kind of have an idea of what they all look like at different positions. Maybe the spring becomes you experiment more with a guy like Marist and you give more of the reps, like at the Rover, whether it's Colley or Snead or whoever it happens to be, like to see what they can do at that Rover position. But I definitely agree that one, best case scenario, one of those two, Colley or Snead, is the Rover going into next season, and you do have Kaiser playing inside more. I think that would benefit everybody.
And it's going to be interesting to see how Notre Dame plays their defense, because they didn't play with a Rover very often this year. They played a lot of nickel. Too. They played a lot of nickel.
And that's where, like, Thomas Harper could,
Right. Absolutely.
Come in.
And so that's where I think it's going to be interesting. Does Al Golden want to play with a Rover? Does he want to play with a DB? I mean, you had it made in the shade when you had the most recent Notre Dame Butkus Award winner playing the Rover position, because he could be out there in the nickel and he could be out there in your base defense. He was literally a swing player that you didn't have to take off the field. And that wasn't the case last year. So they pretty much went with the nickel most of the time. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do it with these young guys getting a little bit more mature, a little bit more confident. And we know that they're more athletic than the guys that they had playing there before. So, yeah, I'm very interested to see the maturation of Al Golden's defense with the various personnel as well.
Right. Little recruiting question from Charles. Justin Scott just postponed his commitment. Is anyone else
yes, he did.
Sick of the emotional roller coaster of recruiting? We get excited just to get let down.
I'll be the first one to agree with that statement, and it is why I could never do Ryan's job. I could not do Ryan's job. It is an absolute emotional roller coaster all the time. And these kids, and they're kids, right? They hold you like right here, and they toy with you. I'm going to come visit. I'm going to set my announcement date. No, I'm not. I'm not going to come visit. I'm not going to announce on that day.
Right.
I need some more time. I'm going to take these calls. I'm not going to take these calls. I'm going to tell these people one thing. I'm going to tell these people another. And people live and die with all of that. I'm not saying the kids are doing it on purpose. I'm just saying recruiting is way too like this for me to be involved with. So
you're absolutely right. And that's why I think both of us, neither one of us has followed it as closely
right?
as others like Ryan or Brian or whoever, just because it's like you're essentially basing your emotions on the whims of 16, 17, and 18-year-olds.
Crazy.
And it's just, and kind of piggybacking on this one, Salty wants to know, to what degree have Notre Dame's odds on landing Scott taken a hit over the last 2 weeks? And, like, it's January right now. We still have the actual February signing day to go for this recruiting class, this year's class, the 2023 class. And then it's next December until the next time, like, these current guys like Justin Scott can sign, and then you end up with these Peyton Bowen situations when it's all said and done. So that's, to me, it's like, I wouldn't get too worked up about whether or not they're committing right now in January, because I just think a lot can change between now and then still.
So much. I mean, what have we learned from the last recruiting cycle with Dante Moore and Peyton Bowen, and I mean all these guys, Keon Keeley, that was, yes, they're coming to Notre Dame, woo, and then they go someplace else. I mean, you just can't get emotionally invested until you see their name on the dotted line, period. So, yeah. And as far as Justin Scott, I don't know that I was all that confident to begin with. I'm on the board just like everybody else, and I read the updates that Brian and Ryan give. Still seems like Notre Dame's in a good spot. So I don't know if it's taking a hit or if it's just going to take longer, and Notre Dame has to keep working. There's nothing wrong with that either. Just keep working. He's worth it. From what I can gather, he's worth it. So let's go.
Gavin wants to know, could we start seeing more premier bowl games up north with the 12-team playoff coming in a year? Now, by bowl games, do you mean on-campus playoff games? Is that what you're referring to? Because the actual bowl games aren't going to move north, but, again, the play, like the first round of the playoff games are going to be, not necessarily up north, but on campus sites anyway, which could be up north, depending on who.
Notre Dame's first round game will almost always, unless they are a lower seed, will almost always be up north because that's where they reside, right? No, I don't think that they're going to create new bowl games that will be in the north unless they're at like Ford Field or, whatever's in Indianapolis these days. It's going to have to be a dome stadium. There's no way they're going to have a premier bowl game, a playoff bowl game in the snow. There's just no way. Only the home games. Only the home games will be indoor or, up north or whatever. The bowl games they're not going to change their locations. They might change the national championship, to up north. That's fine because it'll be in a dome, that kind of a thing. But I don't think they're going to make up new bowl games. And if they do make them up, they're not going to be premier. There's not going to be a brand new bowl that magically is on par with the Rose Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl or anything like that. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Couple interesting offensive questions. One from John. Do you think an assumed more potent offense will result in more aggression on defense, try to create negative plays and turnovers? In other words, were they playing it safe defensively this year because they didn't trust the offense enough to be able to keep up, like to win a shootout kind of game?
I think this is a great question, to be honest with you.
I do too.
And I try to look at it as a coach, right? I try to look at it like, okay, if I'm calling the plays defensively and I call a blitz or I call something fancy to put pressure on or whatever the case may be, a twist, a stunt, or whatever, something with a high degree that it might fail. But if it does succeed, it's a huge success, right? You're way more apt to call something like that on the defensive side of the ball if you've got faith that your offense is going to score a bunch of points because you've got a cushion. You've got that safety net, if you will, on the offensive side, so the defense can be a little bit more aggressive. They don't have to play kind of bend but don't break. They're not going to be on the field as long. All of those different things. Absolutely, I think the defense just. I mean, gosh, if Notre Dame, let's pretend, let's be in a dream world and say Notre Dame averages 40 points a game.
Ooh, man.
Okay, 38, 39, 40 points a game.
I'm getting
good. But I think that's where you got to be if you want to compete for a national championship. Mm-hmm. I think we've discussed that, right? So if they're doing that and you're a defense that gives up like 20, send the house, have some fun. Let's go create turnovers. Like, okay, we just gave up a touchdown. Offense, go score for us.
Yeah,
I mean,
you don't have absolutely. You don't have to worry about, we've got to, we can only allow 15 points a game or whatever, Yeah, I completely agree. They could be a lot more aggressive, I think, and maybe it also allows a little bit of leeway for some of these young guys we're talking about if you get into that kind of situation.
Absolutely.
It definitely felt last year, especially earlier in the season, that and I've talked about this before, that you have a first-time head coach who's a defensive coordinator, and with the inexperience of the quarterback and just relative uncertainty that came with the offense, like he wanted a more conservative game plan offensively. There were times it opened up a little bit more, but that's more or less what they were looking for. And I definitely think when you have the confidence that you're going to be able to put some points on the board, like 35 to 40 points a game, kind of like you're talking about, you can definitely let it rip a little bit more. So, yeah. Absolutely. And I agree. I think that's a really good question.
Yep.
There was another offensive question. Where did it go? This one.
My daughter's in the chat.
Uh-oh.
Which I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. We'll see.
DJ, does Reese change his red zone play calling with Hartman at the helm?
I don't know if he changes it, but I think he can be much more creative with it, because I don't think Hartman's going to be the quarterback in the red zone. I think there's a good chance that it might be Tyler Buckner. So I think you're going to see all kinds of fun stuff in the red zone if Tyler Buckner is the quarterback. So, I mean, run pass options, zone read, all that excitement. I think you're going to see a different Tommy Reese this entire season, let alone in the red zone. So, yes, I will say yes, it does change a little bit.
Yeah. I tend to think so as well. And again, like, who knows if maybe we see Tyler Buckner in the red zone. I don't know. But I think you would hope that with a quarterback like they're getting, that we're just going to see a completely different looking offense. Like, we're going to see a 180. I'm not going to say it's going to look like the first half of the Fiesta Bowl, but
sure.
Who knows? Because again, stable of running backs who can all catch the football, really good young receivers, pretty good young tight ends. All the pass catchers are relatively inexperienced, but there's a lot of talent there. And you've got a veteran quarterback and a really good offensive line. So I can definitely see him open it up.
Yeah, I think it'd be a lot of fun. I think you're going to see some creativity out of Tommy Reese as well. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. It ain't rocket science. Will there be home playoff games? For sure, though.
Well, the for sure part would be so the top 4 teams get a bye, they're not playing at home. Notre Dame will never be a top 4 team. So what's left, right? You've got 8 teams left. So 5, 6, 7, and 8 will all be hosting.
Right.
So if Notre Dame falls into 5, 6, 7, or 8, they host. Period.
Right.
If they're 9,
if
10,
you're
11,
at the
or
lower
12,
end, yeah,
you're going on the road.
Right.
So
nothing is absolute.
Yeah. So that was the proposal that was put out there. Maybe they tweak it, maybe they don't, but that is the way we understand how the 12-team playoff is going to work.
Yeah. I forgot that I need to keep track of our questions for stuff that I have to post later. So I'm scribbling stuff down. I'm trying to remember what we talked about so far.
Oh boy.
So, yeah, I know. Here's an interesting one. Seeing Notre Dame's schedule, what's one team you would add and who would you replace them with?
Ooh, now that's interesting. We've kind of tossed that around. Like, who would you want to have like as a perennial, opponent, that kind of stuff. And, if we're living in reality, right, we have to keep all the ACC teams. But do we live in reality for this question, Sean? What do you think?
Well, considering the I don't think you can take the ACC teams off the schedule, because I mean they're part of the schedule for another 13 14 years.
Yes.
So
Yes.
They're stuck with that. We know they're stuck with that. We know they're stuck with Stanford, Navy, and USC.
Correct. Agreed. So
there's still some other. That's only what 8 teams right there. So you still have 4 games to play with.
Your options are Tennessee State, Central Michigan, Ohio State, and Stanford.
Yeah,
those are the 4. Now, as a traditionalist, I'm sorry, and this may upset some people, but I would take Tennessee State off the schedule and literally replace them with anybody. I don't like that game.
I don't either.
I always enjoyed the fact that Notre Dame never dipped into the FCS
this
level.
Irks me. It really irks me that they're going to the, and I know they're trying to.
I know why they're doing
sort of mask it by the fact that they're going with an HBCU as the FCS team, but I still like the fact that they were basically the lone holdout who had never played one, and especially I don't care what you say, people aren't going to look at the fact that you have Ohio State, Clemson, and USC on the schedule. They're going to go, "Oh, you're playing Tennessee State. Oh, Notre Dame doesn't play anybody." It's
right. You're going to
the
run
national
into that
perception.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Even I agree.
Alabama plays the Citadel,
right?
Yeah. I mean, now if Tennessee State was not on the schedule, and let's say it was like a Toledo or a Western Michigan or whatever, right, a MAC school of some sort, my next one would be Stanford. I would take them off the schedule. I'm not a fan of that game. I don't like that game. It's not good. Dude, talk about replacing a powder puff with, a team that you could lose to. That's a massive change. I would, I guess, I'm looking at a blue blood that I would want to have, like a Texas, maybe a Tennessee, something like that. Yes, it's a possibility for a loss. No doubt about it, but I'm okay with doing that. So yeah, Texas State would be my off, and then Stanford would be my next.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a Penn State come on the schedule for a couple of years. It's been a long time since we've seen Penn State.
Today's a perfect day to have Penn State in town. Snow.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Or they're plenty like Arizona. They've played Arizona State a few times. Throw Arizona on there.
Sean,
do a home and home. Go to the desert once.
Is it wrong that I want to play Arizona State at least once over the next 2 or 3 years?
Not at all. And that's actually it's not a bad one either. Mick asks if Sam Hartman is matriculated at Notre Dame yet. I would assume because classes have started. So
Notre Dame
he's going to be available for us to talk to a week from Friday. So
they the first day that they were on campus, there was a picture of him and Caleb Smith together in the locker room on the football Twitter. So yeah. 100%.
Derek says Penn State does nothing for him. I mean, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. There's really nobody who jumps out because Notre Dame has played so many. It would be kind of exciting to see in Oregon, but if we're talking next year specifically, do you really want Oregon and Ohio State and Clemson and USC?
It's a lot.
Your schedule. The goal is still to get to the playoffs. So
taking Tennessee State off and adding any one of the teams that we just talked about, dramatically increases their strength of schedule, right? But it also dramatically increases the possibility they're going to lose some games. So where do you weigh that, right?
Exactly.
I mean, the reality is Notre Dame should be about a 30-point favorite over Tennessee State.
Right.
That you really gain nothing. You gain a little PR maybe, but other than that, you're expected to blow them out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't,
and you're coming back from Ireland the week before to go along with it.
Yeah. I don't know. There's nothing good about this game for me.
Maybe they did that intentionally because they think they can come back from Ireland. And
how'd that work out last year when they came back from Columbus and played Marshall?
Yeah.
That's saying.
I hear you. Logan, what's our confidence on a scale of 1 to 10 that all 4 of Buckner, Angeli, Minchie, and Carr are on the team in 2024?
So that would be Buckner's senior year. It would be Angeli's junior year, Minchie sophomore, Carr freshman. I will actually, the only one of these 4 that I could see not being on the team would be Angeli. I think the other 4 will be here, or the other 3 will be here for sure. So really it comes down to, do I think Steve Angeli will be on the roster as a junior? I'm going to say yes, because I think he's going to stay, get his degree, and then leave to go play someplace. So, and this is, I don't know Steve Angeli from Adam. I don't. So I don't know what his thoughts are about Notre Dame and the degree and all. I don't. I guess that's what I would tell my son if he was buried on the depth chart. Hey, stick it out, get your degree, have 3 years to play someplace else.
At the end of 2023, he's going to be 2 years in, and he's 1 year away from his degree.
Right. Yep.
So you're still going to keep all that eligibility.
Right.
You might as well stick it out and get your degree at that point. And then if you want to go someplace else, if it's not looking like you're, it's in the cards for you at Notre Dame to be the starter, go someplace else. But you're exactly right. Because my initial thought when I saw this, my number was very low. And then kind of hearing you talk through that, I think it makes a lot of sense that they probably are all 4 here, because like if you go from the bottom, Carr and Minchie, they're both going to be, as you said, a freshman and a sophomore. You would expect that they'll both still be here. Things work out with Buckner. We would expect him to be in line to be the starter going into 24. So you would expect him to be here. And then you're right. The question is Angeli and whether or not he would still be around by what would be, going into his junior season at that point.
Yep.
But again, with all that eligibility remaining.
So. Yeah, exactly. I think it's a win-win for him to stick around for 3 years, get his degree, and then head off. And I would not, it'd be like, hey man, thanks for being here. Go do you, man. I would have no issue with him leaving at that point, because I think this fall, so 23, I think he's going to be 3rd on the depth chart. And I think it's not going to get much better moving forward.
Derek's been a little bit more of a pot stirrer lately. He asked, what if Angeli wins the blue gold game again?
That is one of my favorite arguments that people put forth last year. So when Buckner goes down and you're talking about, Angeli, and when Pine was struggling and all that, well, he won the blue gold game. It was amazing. There was one player on the defense that had any kind of rotation defensively. And yeah, he scored the winning touchdown. No doubt about it. Against walk-ons and guys that are absolutely buried on the depth chart. Good for him. You know what? If Angeli wins the blue gold game again, I will stand and I will give him a round of applause and I'll cheer and it'll be fun and exciting. It means nothing when it comes to the depth chart.
Yeah. Running back question from Lucas. Do you feel that if both Diggs and Estime have good injury-free seasons next year, they could both jump to the NFL even with less attempts due to an improved passing game?
What's this continued to? And I don't even know where that one's at. Yes, I do think that that's an absolute possibility. Here we go. And then he finishes it up with they could both be at the 350 to 400 career carries. Look, when it comes to running back, you have a shelf life. You just do. I mean, history has shown us that there's only so many carries on the legs of a running back. They'll be here for 3 years. They'll get their degrees. Peace be.
I was shocked that Blake Corum stayed at Michigan.
Me too.
To be quite honest, especially like we were talking about that whole fund. Yeah, like we were talking about that whole fund raising $25,000. Like, again, I don't know what his draft evaluation came, but it's like they don't tell him, well, you're going to be a 6th or a 7th round guy. They just tell you stay in school. So, but I was shocked because of what you're talking about. There's only so many carries in the legs and the body. Look at Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah,
my guy now, and how different he looks right now compared to 3 years ago.
He went off a cliff.
Yes,
what it feels like.
Yes.
And I had no problem. Oh my gosh, who's the running back last year who he plays for
Kyron Williams?
Thank you. Wow.
Yeah,
I had no problem with Kyron Williams leaving early. I no problem. Go do you, man. Like, you had your 2 years of great production at Notre Dame, and he got a lot of playing time in the NFL. Like, he was ready to go. And so if those two have a legit chance to be contributors at the NFL level and they get good, grades and all that stuff, I have no problem with them leaving. And I think it's a real possibility But here's the best part about it. That is the most stacked room at Notre Dame. That's fine if they head out. You'll be losing 3 running backs that year.
Right. They're recruiting really well at that position now. Yeah. It's like, and it's, as long as Dylan stays around, and who knows how long that'll be before, because his goal is to become a coordinator and ultimately become a head coach himself. And I think most guys are, but I mean, he's recruiting it really well and developing it really well right now.
Yeah. I would love to have one or both of them stick around till their senior year. I just don't think that that's realistic. So, and I don't blame them. I really don't.
And again, like, it's a good problem to have because more guys leaving more regularly after their junior year, even though they're so talented, you would love them to stay, like Michael Mayer. The better you recruit, the more it's going to happen. You're going to see fewer and fewer guys stay all 4 years, let alone 5 years and 6 years in some of these other guys' cases.
It's the reality of when you have a good team and you have good production and all of that. It's the reality that we're all going to have to get used to, and just be thankful that in football they have to at least be here for 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. Jeff, given the defensive line is not gap closing caliber yet, is Hartman good enough on the O side to take this team to the title game and not just make the playoff? D-line is not championship game caliber.
I agree. It's not championship game caliber as we sit here on January 25th. Completely agree with that. There's a lot of potential on this defensive line. I think there's going to be a couple of guys that surprise some people. I'm not saying that they're going to be championship game caliber, but I do think this offense can score enough points to be championship game caliber. I do. I mean, we've seen it how many times, and Brian has echoed this, and we've talked about this a bunch. You need a good defense. Now, Georgia has had a great defense and an offense that does whatever, they were very creative this year. Yeah. I would say offensively, Georgia was. I think Notre Dame can be that decent, that good on offense. I don't know if they're going to be that good on defense, but if you can score more points than the other team, that's what it's all about. And when you get to the playoff, that's what you need to do, is score points. I think this team's going to be able to score points. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think everything I see about this offense and what I know about Tommy Rees, what I know about Sam Hartman, the offensive line, the running backs, what I think I know about the wide receivers, I think this team can score points, Sean. I do.
Yeah, I think that you just need to be good enough. You don't need to be elite from a defensive side. You just need to be kind of like top 25, top 30 in those key metrics defensively that we talked about last week, like stopping the run, total defense, those kind of things. And just what you're saying, I think this is the reason they went out and got a Sam Hartman, so that the margin of error, there's a much greater margin of error, and everything doesn't have to be perfect to win every game, because now you should be capable of scoring somewhere around 38, 40 points per game when you have a quarterback with the experience of Hartman. So absolutely, yeah, I think that he can. I mean, we all know what games it's going to come down to, and that's
you're absolutely right.
Basically,
you're absolutely right. And is the defense good enough to stop Clemson? I think it is, or at least slow them down. Is the defense good enough to stop Ohio State? I think that remains to be seen, because we just don't know enough about what that offense is going to look like,
and who their quarterback will even be.
Who their quarterback, yeah, exactly. And that's the biggest thing that we just don't know, right? We'll have a good idea going into that game, because there'll be games under the belt of both teams. So you're absolutely right. It's going to come down to the 3 games, right? USC, Ohio State, Clemson. Those are the ones it's going to come down to. We'll see.
Yeah. Logan says Hartman threw 14 and 12 interceptions his last 2 seasons at Wake. Would you predict over or under 10 for the upcoming season? I mean, I think 10 is a really good number. Yes, I'll say this, because of the running game and a much better offensive line that he's going to have here that he didn't have at Wake Forest, I think it's going to cut down. He's not going to have as many attempts, and just, naturally, kind of by definition, the more you put it in the air, the more more chances for interceptions that you have. I think 10 is a really tough number, though. Because I think it's going to be right around there.
I do too.
but I definitely don't think he's going to be in that 12 to 15 range that he's talking about like he was at Wake Forest, because again, he's going to have a better offensive line to pass protect him better, as well as the running game is going to be much better that he can lean on, and he didn't have those things at Wake Forest.
Agreed. That's going to be the big difference. It's not all going to be on his shoulders. He's not going to have to force things. Right. And I think some of his interceptions, from what I've been watching, he's on top of the offensive line with that slow mesh. He's going to be able to be a little bit further back. He's going to be able to scan. It's going to be different. And I don't see him forcing the ball like he had to do at Wake Forest. I just don't see it. So I will conservatively say under, but I think it's, like you said, I think it's a really, really good number. I think he's going to end up at about 8, 9, 10 in that neighborhood. So 10 is a really good number. I'll say under and hope for the best. I'm hoping that he's handing the ball off an awful lot towards the end of games. They're just icing the dang thing.
I mean, but, we'll he's also going to have a better defense. Even if it's not maybe going to be elite, he's going to have a better defense than he had at Wake. I mean, it was essentially like he had to go out and sling it quite a bit because they had to be a more wide open offensive type team because of what they were working with down there at Wake Forest.
Right.
A lot of real, I'll throw this women's basketball question in.
There we go.
Right now. Kind of saved some of them. Salty, will Sonia Citron do the most on the team to fill in for Mabry's lost productivity? And I realize a lot of people were down on Mabry because of her defense. She actually was a much better defensive player this year than she was given credit for. I mean, hell, on the play, she ended up injuring her knee. It was a steal, and she was going for a bucket, and the defender was trying to run her down. So, and I think she had like 5 steals the game before that against Clemson as well, 5 of the 21 that Notre Dame had. But the answer to this question, I think that she's going to be the one, like, they'd wanted Citron to shoot a little bit more anyway. And, I don't know if it was definitely cause and effect the other night, but she hit her first 6 3-pointers in that same game after Mabry's injury. She had 18 3-pointers made going into that game. She hit a third of that in that one game that night against Virginia. So, yeah, I think she's going to, but again, you'll probably see, you've got to see more KK Bransford. She's not a 3-point shooter, so she won't be doing that. But I think the threes themselves, I think more of them will come from Citron, and you'll probably see more of Cass Prosper taking some shots as well. Because I've said since this happened that her development is going to have to sort of speed up now, because she's gone from a luxury, I think, to someone they're going to have to depend on a lot more without that extra guard who can shoot some threes. And Cass can shoot some threes as well, but she can also play really good defense. Yep. So, and we have a men's basketball question from Irish Chi-Town. Who should replace Mike Bray after he retires? And I mean,
this is like, again, it's like shooting darts, man. Like it just depends on what direction they want to go. What direction does Jack Swarbrick want to go? Does he want to stay with the Mike Bray coaching tree? I don't know that would be the greatest idea on the planet. Does he want to go with an established head coach? Does he want to go with a young kind of up and coming head coach? I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know the basketball landscape from a coaching standpoint well enough to really answer it, if I'm being honest. I don't know what you have to say.
Now, I mean, there's so many different ways you can go, and I've used the guy at Kansas State as an example right now. He's like a mid 40s, early 50s kind of guy, a career assistant. He was at Baylor on a really successful program at Baylor. And in his first year at Kansas State, they just beat Kansas last week, and now they're the number 5 team in the country, and he had to do a complete roster overhaul. So I think there are a lot of really good coaches out there. I think it's going to be what kind of style they want and sort of what they want, the philosophy, like, has their standard changed? Like, is it just acceptable? Hey, get us to the tournament every other year and we'll be fine with that. Right. It's just going to depend. again, that's why the benefit of knowing that this is what Mike Bray is going to do, it gives you almost 2 full months really until the season ends. Am I right on that? More than 2 full months, like 2.5 full months, like when you get down to the Final Four, because again, that's where a lot of guys, do their interviews and stuff like that, is once you get to the Final Four, that's where the coaches convention and all that stuff is. So I can't tell you anyone specific, but I think especially once tournament time rolls around, that always seems to unveil some of the hot candidates as well. So
sure, yeah,
I think they're going to have a pretty big pool. It is still an ACC team, and Mike Bray did show that you can have some success here. So it's just a matter of finding the fit. And like one of the names I saw Tom Noy throw out last week was Rick Pitino, and like what would that be like if Rick Pitino rolled into the Dome and Rick Pitino is coaching Notre Dame? And that's really all it is right now is, again, like talking about your dartboard, all we're really doing is throwing darts at the board because there are so many names out there. And there's just, I don't think I would say that they are still probably in the early information gathering stage of, like starting to look at some guys who could be some potential candidates. So I think it's way too early to talk specific names right now.
Absolutely agree. And Digger's not going to be coaching at 81 years old.
No, I don't think Digger's coming back. No,
he's always at all the games, and they always put him on the Jumbotron or whatever. And he can barely move, it looks like, unfortunately. Yeah. And Bobby Knight was another suggestion, 82. He's 82. So
yeah. Chi-Town also wants to know if we can get Mike Bray. I mean, we can always give it a shot on the show.
Yeah.
So
I would be surprised.
We can do.
But you never know.
Yeah. All they can do is say no if you ask, right?
Yep. You got it.
Oh, John, with 2 late buys, does this schedule set up nicely for a playoff run if we're 7-1 or 8-0 coming off USC?
It would set. I mean, they're not going to the 12-teamer this year, right? So it's still just the Final Four. Is that accurate? Okay. So
still one more year until they go to 12.
So if this was next year, I would say, yeah, I think it sets up really nicely for them. This year, I don't think it makes a darn bit of difference because if they make the playoff, they don't play until December 31st or January 1st or whatever. They're going to be just fine. So I don't think it has anything to do with the playoff, to be honest with you.
Like the buys, you mean? You don't think the buys have any? Yeah,
I really don't.
Probably don't either. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah.
And the buys stink. Here's my thinking looking at the schedule is, and we all know this whole, the ACC and the ACC schools tend to get the buys before Notre Dame and all that stuff, even though Notre Dame keeps winning.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
But, I think the basketball teams have been hosed recently by the ACC. It feels like the ACC is making a more concerted effort to stick it to Notre Dame even more, even though there's been some of that. I know the basketballs feel that, especially from the men's side over the years, like they've gotten no favors because of the whole, Notre Dame football remaining independent. And when you look at where it is, that Notre Dame wanted those buys in some different places, like where NC State would have been a good place to put the first one. But obviously, you've got an ACC game there, and the ACC dictated when that game.
It's an early ACC game too.
Yeah,
which I don't know. I'm not a big fan,
and that's my point.
Yeah,
and that's my point. The ACC said no, that's not how we're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree. I don't think that there's probably a huge impact from the buys. I think it's more, about win your games.
It's just funny to me when people talk about Notre Dame's buys and how it's not fair that they have teams have buys. But I mean, you think Wake Forest, do you think their fans are going to be like, it's not fair. Notre Dame's got to buy before they play us.
I know.
It's like, it's not that big of a deal.
I'm going to say this super chat actually for rapid fire. Okay. I just saw the question. I actually only saw the top. I thought it was just someone throwing us some cash. So I hit it and it was like, oh, there's an actual question there. So I want to think about that a little bit more. Nick wants to know, is it more attractive for the NFL for running backs to be in a loaded backfield and have lower touches in college, or have high production and more touches?
If I'm an NFL GM, now I can't speak for GMs in the NFL, right? Because God knows what decisions they're making and why they're making them. But if I was an NFL GM, I would want the least amount of touches possible, but with proven production. So, because again, there's a shelf life on running backs. I truly feel there are only so many carries in a running back, right?
Yeah.
So I want the least amount of carries possible, but you've proven to me that you can be productive in all the ways that I need you to be productive. But I got a much more tread on the tires of that running back. So that's what I would look for if I was a GM. I don't want a guy that carries the ball 25, 30 times a game his entire career, and now he's going to the NFL. I would not want that.
Yeah, and like, who was that a few years ago? Chubb and the two guys at Georgia. Chubb and who was the other guy?
Sony Michel.
Yeah, Sony Michel. Thank you. Yeah, and they both ended up being drafted. And I think as long as you're both producing and you're hitting the benchmarks that NFL teams are looking for, it definitely helps the player long term by not having as many touches. You might not be as high a draft pick, but most running backs aren't anyway. And even when you get to the NFL, it's still the trend to split carries whenever possible, and not put all the wear on one guy and not have to pay one guy ultimately either. So, as long as you can go out and run a good 40 time and you're durable, and like if you're in college and you're averaging around 5 yards a carry or better, I think that goes a long way regardless of who you're splitting reps with. And it's like you go back to those early 90s Lou Holtz teams, coming like championship era and into the 90s. Like Ricky Waters was far from a big star when he was at Notre Dame, but look at what he ended up once he got to the NFL. Because
he had a ton of tread left on the tires.
Yeah.
And he was playing a little wide receiver. So he wasn't getting banged around as much. He played wide receiver early in his career. So he had a ton of tread left on the tires. That's why he had such a long NFL career.
Yep. Had a lot of juice left in him. Fortunately, a lot of it was with the 49ers, but can't have everything.
Correct.
Have you seen any more that you definitely want to get to here, Vince?
I can answer a couple of these really quickly.
All right, you hit it.
Let's see here. Where was the one? I think I started, so I'm going to look there.
There's a couple that I was definitely throwing in there, for
this one. Yeah. Which Notre Dame football assistant do you expect to leave the program for a promotion first?
Man,
I thought this was a good one.
That's tough, just because, like, who expected Taylor and McNulty to jump last year?
Exactly. And if you go on talent alone, that's the way I have to take this, right? You have to go on who we think is the best coach, right? Or one of the best coaches. And I think if you do that, it goes down to two guys. I think it could be Mike Mickens, and I think it could be Brian Mason, if you're just talking about production and coaching, right? Or is it the obvious one, and you go with Tommy Rees, and he's going to leave for the NFL, right? I think you could go either way with these. I'll go with Brian Mason. I think as important as special teams are, because they are incredibly important, I feel like he could get a promotion out of special teams to something else because somebody sees something in him.
See, and to me, that's tougher just because it is special teams. Like, I have a hard time seeing like what the natural next move for him would be, unless he was going to be a head coach at a smaller school, maybe something like that,
Sure.
I would even throw McCullough in there.
Yeah.
Again, because of what we've seen production-wise from that room and the recruiting that he's been able to do in that room. And he's got the NFL experience and all that kind of stuff. So, and John Christophic says Al Golden. And, there was some interest in Al Golden going back to, going potential, like with the Cincinnati job when Luke Fickell left, but he decided to stay here. I think that he could be a definite, like, that's a weird one, because he made the decision to leave the NFL after being there for 6 years to come back to college. Like, how long does he want to be a college coordinator before he thinks about maybe becoming a head coach again. I think that's a really kind of curious one for me.
Yeah, because I think the Brian Mason one for me would be very similar to what the last special teams coordinator did at Notre Dame. He went straight from being special teams coordinator to being a head coach at Nevada, and obviously didn't do well there and came back to being the special teams coordinator at Notre Dame. But I think that's the natural progression. I could see him getting a head coaching job, at a smaller school, right? Like a Nevada, for example. I could see that being the case,
Yeah.
And the last one I wanted to throw up here, and this could be a quick one.
Okay.
From Lucas, he says, which team aside from the big three of USC, Clemson, and Ohio State could pull off a victory over Notre Dame next season? I thought this was a good one because everybody's going to focus on those three, rightfully so. But to me, I think the next team on the list would be Duke. I think they return a lot. I think they got a really good head coach. I think they have an up-and-coming quarterback. I think, and it's going to be at Duke, so it's on the road. It's the week after Ohio State. We know what happened the week after Ohio State this past year. So I'm going to go with Duke on this one.
Yeah, because it's at Duke and because of the year that Mike Elko had, that would not surprise me as well. There aren't really any others that are jumping. Right. Like I looked at that NC State. It's at NC State. They've got Brennan Armstrong and all that. Like Notre Dame didn't have to face Armstrong when they played at Virginia, last year. So that was one. NC State was kind of up and down. A lot of it, I think, maybe had to do with both, Leary and his kind of up and down play, I think, this year as well. But those are probably the two, because we're saying aside from USC, Clemson, and Ohio State, those would probably be the two that jump out at me, because they're both road games and they were both, pretty solid teams this year.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right. There's a few in here that I'm going to mix in with rapid fire.
Ooh.
So are you ready for rapid fire?
I'm so ready. Let's go. Hump Day rapid fire. Let's go.
All right. Knowing only what you know about them right now, who would you rather have locked in for the next 2 years? Tyler Buchner at quarterback or Mike Mickens as defensive coordinator?
See, this is a very interesting question, because as I read this question, it was very obvious to me what I would pick. And then I thought to myself, does Sean know something that I don't know as I was reading this?
I don't. I saw someone else pose kind of an either-or question on a show I was watching today, and I was like, ooh, that's good. And I'm like, I got to come up with an either-or kind of thing for Vince today. And so I was like, this is the best I could come up with.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. It's Tyler Buchner for me. I think Notre Dame, if they want to be where they want to be as far as the quarterback position is concerned, I really think Hartman to Buchner to Carr/Minchie, whoever it happens to be after that, I think they need to start stacking good quarterbacks and good quarterback play. And so if you can guarantee me that Tyler Buchner is going to be here in 24, I'm taking that all day.
Yeah, see, this is no offense to Tyler Buchner, but I kind of go the other way with Mike Mickens, because, again, like if Al Golden were to leave and become a head coach someplace, there are a lot of people already talking about Mickens, and Mickens has a ton of familiarity with Marcus Freeman. He was obviously working in Marcus Freeman's system at Cincinnati before he came to Notre Dame a year before Freeman. They've worked together for a long time. They've got a lot of familiarity. He kind of knows what Marcus Freeman wants in a defense. He's done a great job of coaching up the secondary so far. So I think that there is a bit more of a track record right now with Mike Mickens of success, because, again, we're saying only knowing what we know about them right now. We're still kind of projecting that Tyler Buchner is going to be the guy. Like, I think that I can project for the next 2 years with more certainty that there would be a forward success out of Mike Mickens than Tyler Buchner. Again, it's not that I don't believe in Tyler Buchner, but we've got to pick one of the two. in this. And so I'm picking Mike Micketts.
Okay. Fair enough. I figured that was the way you were going to go just based on the way the question was phrased. But yeah, I'm not going to rehash my pick, but I feel strongly in it.
Yes. Fill in the blank. It would be blank if Notre Dame is not 4-0 going into the Ohio State game next year.
It would be a huge disappointment, like a massive disappointment. If they can't roll out victories against Navy, Tennessee State, NC State, and Central Michigan, it's going to be a long season. I don't see how any other result is even a little bit okay. I mean, I hate to be that guy, but if they're 3-1, if they're 3-1, that's a massive problem. It's a massive problem.
It would be unacceptable if they lose one of those 4 games, even if it is NC State.
Yeah.
But you can't have another Marshall. Like, again, you got some leeway in year 1. There was a learning curve in year 1 for a first-year head coach. The program is supposed to be, and the head coach is supposed to be in a different state by year 2. If they are not 4-0 against Navy, Tennessee State, North Carolina State, and Central Michigan, there are big problems at that point, because now you're losing games that are keeping you, because even if you go on to beat Ohio State and Clemson, for example, or Ohio State and USC going into Clemson, well, you've still lost a game that's going to keep you out of the playoff, and you can't be losing games that keep you out of the playoff. You can afford to lose a game to a good team as long as you are competitive in said game. You can't be losing games like this. These are the kind of games that are supposed to fill your schedule and give you a chance to have those big games count that put you into the college football playoff at the end of the season.
Absolutely. And you can't look past NC State to the 5th game of the season. You can't. I mean, that will be the first quote unquote big game of the year. You can't look past that to Ohio State. You can't look past the first 4 opponents to a game that's happening at the end of September. I mean, I feel like they're going to be focused enough to do and it's their first game really on the road. Yes, I know Navy is in Dublin, Ireland. I don't care if you played Navy on the moon. You're not going to lose to Navy. Okay. They're going to have a brand new head coach. They're not a good football team. All right. So this is your first road test. I just don't see how they don't show up for that game. I just don't.
I agree. So here's the super chat that I kind of held off on and wants to know, who do you think is the best athlete to play a sport for Notre Dame in the past 23 years? Not best at position or sport, but greatest athleticism. And this is exactly the amount of time that I have been here covering Notre Dame.
It seems odd that it would be that exact.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I was looking at that. I was trying to figure out that handle. I was like, do I know this person? Who is this?
It's a very interesting thing. Okay, so my mind immediately goes to the 2 sport athletes that were on campus, right? You've got Jeff Samardzija. You've got Golden Tate. Those are the first ones that come to mind for me. I know there's been some guys that have run track as well as played football.
Pat Connaughton,
basketball, baseball. Good one. He's a crazy athlete.
You got to say Connaughton.
That's a really good one, actually. I'm still gonna go with Golden Tate. I still think he was athletic as all get out. Being able to do what he's able to do, the speed he's able to put down. I'm gonna go with Golden Tate, but I don't know that there's a wrong answer here.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm gonna go with Samardzija. Actually, getting to see basically every football and baseball game of his career.
You did.
And, he was still very raw as a pitcher when he was at Notre Dame. And I was quite frankly kind of shocked that he was drafted by the Cubs and that they, gave him all the money to walk away from football and become a professional pitcher. And because of, 1, his competitiveness, and 2, his athleticism, just his athletic ability, those 2 things turned him into a guy who got a big fat contract and pitched pretty well at the major league level for several years. So I'm going to go with Samardzija for my answer.
Like I said, it's not a bad there's not a bad pick when you're talking about these various guys. And I was lucky enough to see a lot of that as well. And you're absolutely right. The fact that he could literally run over from a football game and be in the dugout for a baseball game was impressive.
That's right.
Was very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, Jalen Smith is a really good one too. And it's a shame that he had that injury because, man, I tell you what, I kind of, because I can't stand either the Eagles or the Giants. I was basically ISOing on watching Jalen Smith in that game the other day, and it was just not good.
He made a lot of tackles, but they weren't where they needed to be made. And
that's the thing. If all you're going to do is look at the stat sheet on him now, I mean, so you were paying attention to the same thing. How many of them were at the line of scrimmage or what you would call a destructive tackle? Right. They were all like chasing guys downfield, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's what he was with the Cowboys his last couple years there as well. Again, it's very unfortunate, but that's the way.
But it felt like he was in on almost every tackle, did it not? I mean,
right. But there were also times where it would be frustrating to watch, where like he was in pursuit to some extent, and then it's like he'd see a couple other guys get to the ball, even though the tackle hadn't been made yet, and he already starts kind of letting up before he even gets there.
Julian Love and Jalen Smith both tied for the lead in tackles in that game.
There you go.
So
there you go.
A safety and linebacker tied for the lead in tackles. So there you go.
John with a football trivia question. Who was the player who coined the term Hail Mary as a football play? Do you know this, Vince?
I do not. I don't know why I started, because I didn't. I guess I started because whenever I hear a trivia question and you're involved, it just
just to be clear, I'm not looking at anyone who's answering in the queue in the comments right now, so I have no idea what anyone is saying. This is Roger Staubach. It was the Hail Mary pass to Drew Pearson against the Minnesota Vikings in the playoffs. Roger Staubach is the answer, because I think after the game he said something about I said a Hail Mary and I threw it up there and it became the Hail Mary pass. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Nice.
There you go, Chi-Town. Thank you, sir. All right. Back to the prearranged questions for rapid fire. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame basketball commit Brady Dunlap has decommitted in the wake of Mike Bray's announcement that he's stepping down at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, it's not overly surprising, that you would have some shakeup after Mike Bray decides to step down. It's not that surprising to me, I guess. And I don't know Brady, obviously. I've never talked to him or his people or anything like that. If I were a dad and my son was committed to play at Notre Dame or play anywhere for that matter, and there was a coaching change, especially after you sign your letter of intent, I would counsel my son, hey, wait and see who the next coach is going to be, and let's make a decision then.
Yeah.
Have a conversation with whoever's taking over, because number one, if it is my son and I'm giving him counsel, we selected the school for more than just who the head coach is. Okay.
Right.
Maybe they have a major that my son wants to participate in, the location, whatever the case may be. All of those things would have had to been checked off, right? It can't just be about the head coach. And I feel like if Brady is decommitting because Mike Bray is leaving, maybe he wasn't committed for the right reasons in the first place. And maybe that's okay. Maybe he needs to, expand his search a little bit. But I would personally be a little bit more hesitant. So I think it's unfortunate. That's my fill-in word. It's unfortunate, but not overly surprising.
Yeah, and I mean, between the fact that Bray is leaving and that is the guy, the guy who recruited him, and he thanked Antoni Weiss, in his
he did,
social media as well. I mean, the assistants are going to be gone too, so you've got no relationship now. So, that's part of the tough part of this whole thing, but as well as you look at the way this program is playing and you see what's lined up, like who's here right now, like what if you're
a big
senior in high school, yet you have no idea what anything is going to look like 2 months from now, let alone 8 months from now, when they're rolling out the balls and they start practicing next year. You have no idea who the head coach is going to be. You have no idea who your teammates are going to be, if it's going to be a competitive, type situation. So it's hard to blame a kid,
I don't blame him at all.
making that kind of decision.
I would just tell him to pump the brakes a little bit because you've got plenty of time to make a new decision. Well, and here's the other thing. All of these schools, and if I know my recruiting right, all of these schools have gotten their letters of intent from all their players. Like, how many more landing spots are there? That's the other thing. And with the nature of the way,
especially in basketball,
right? Yeah. With the way the transfer portal works, stick it out at Notre Dame for a year, man, and then you can transfer after your freshman year. Like I would worry about him finding a landing spot. I'm sure he will. He's a 4-star recruit. He's a highly recruitable guy. But hey, there's a lot of question marks, just like you said. And, there's a reason that Notre Dame sent all 3 assistant coaches to Marcus Burton's game on Friday night. They're trying to make sure he stays in the class, whether they're there or not. They want to, hey, it's going to be okay.
Well, and that's, also good on them because, again,
right,
none of those guys are going to be here next year.
Right. And all 3 of them were at that game. So, And I know for a fact Marcus has questions. Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Who wouldn't have questions?
Exactly. All right. Tom Brady snapped at Jim Gray. They do a podcast together. The old broadcaster, Jim Gray. He snapped at Jim Gray when Gray asked Brady what he's going to do next. So I've got the audio from that.
Guessing, you've said you'll take your time. Do you have any type of a timetable as to what you might want to do regarding your football career?
Jim, if I knew what I was going to fucking do, I'd have already done it. Okay? I'm taking it a day at a time. I appreciate you asking. Thank you.
I can tell.
All right. Tom Brady. So what do you think of that, Vince?
Oh, that was a great response by Gray, though. Yeah, I can tell. Okay. First of all, Tom, how could you not know that this question was coming? It's the biggest question out there concerning your future. Are you really surprised that question was asked? Come on, man. Handle it with a little bit more professionalism.
To me, this feels like, like pro wrestling. It's like Mean Gene, Jim Gray was Mean Gene Okerlund, and he was setting up Rowdy Piper to just go nuts on him, for whatever question. It's like, he's putting him over. Like, he had to have known that they were going to talk about this, right? And it just felt like, it's like, let's just make it as viral as possible so everyone hears this. That's almost what it feels like to me,
Good call. I didn't even think about it that way, but it's like he got real hostile, and then he's like, but thanks for asking. Or whatever.
Right.
Come on, man. You knew that question was going to be asked.
He had to know.
Gray, he has literally a one-on-one with you. That's what everybody wants to know.
He's like literally become Tom Brady's personal, media guy. That's 100%. Like, what else does Jim Gray do these days besides interview Tom Brady every week?
Exactly. What did you think he was going to ask you? Hey, how the kids doing?
Right.
Come on, man. Be a little bit more professional. That's what I'll say to that. Just be a little more professional.
I agree. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Jeff Saturday is among a handful of candidates who are going to get a second interview for the Colts head coaching vacancy.
So when they hired him in the first place, I said it was a PR move. You had 5 or 6 weeks of Jeff Saturday to see what he could do. I believe they went 1 in the season, right? Isn't that about right? I don't think they won a second game.
1-7, correct.
Yep. So it's ludicrous that he's getting an opportunity for a second interview. I have no problem with the first. It's ridiculous that he's getting a second. It's ridiculous. I'm sure Jeff Saturday's a great guy, but I think he proved to us he's not a head coach in the NFL just yet. Or maybe ever.
To me, it's like if, we started off talking about, Hartman and his Heisman odds and all that kind of stuff. And like, I would think that there are probably got to be some pretty good odds on Jeff Saturday getting the job. It just seems like, from the minute he got the interim job to begin with, coming out of the ESPN booth with no NFL experience at all, it just seems like Jim Irsay wants him to be the guy. And the fact that he even got one interview it's like, okay, you get the token interview, but now you're giving him a second interview. It just feels like he's
destined, like
pulling in that. Yes.
Yeah.
He's pulling in that direction. Like it's destined to happen.
And it just felt like when he was named the head coach to begin with, 8 weeks ago or whatever, 8, 9, 10 weeks ago, we were all shocked. And I think we shared that same shock with Jeff Saturday, to be honest with you.
Right.
I think he was just as shocked as anybody else that he was the next head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. But I also think that he was look, you and I are not at all qualified to be the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. But if Jim Irsay picked up the phone and called you and said, hey, I need you to be the head coach, would you turn it down?
No.
I wouldn't.
It's going to pay pretty well.
Yeah.
Okay. At the very least, I'll get a nice paycheck for a few weeks.
All right, Jim. Sounds good. When's the press conference? I'll be there.
Right.
I don't blame Jeff Saturday. I blame the people giving him the interview.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I don't think Chris Ballard really wants any of it, the general manager. And I'll be kind of curious to see what happens if they do end up going with Jeff Saturday.
Yeah.
Like, what does Chris Ballard's job become? Does he keep that job? Is he actively pursuing another general manager?
Does he want that job at that point?
Yeah.
I don't know that he does.
Exactly. We Are Not Marshall says you can fill out your staff from the chat.
That's funny.
Eric Bieniemy is the one. It's like, and I heard somebody kind of float this, I think last week. Like, if Eric Bieniemy doesn't get a job in this cycle, because it's been like at least 4 cycles now that he's gone through.
Yeah.
Like, maybe he needs to go someplace else and get away from Andy Reid and prove that he can, be a good offensive coordinator in a different system. I don't know if it's the system that's keeping him back, the way he interviews.
Man,
it's just crazy because he's not really the hot name anymore. He has interviewed for some of these, but he's not the hot name anymore. And he was the hot name for those first few years.
It's like his time came and went.
Yes. Salty, true or false, the Cowboys need to move on from Dak Prescott if they wish to contend for a Super Bowl victory. And look, we talked about this last night, and just, so everyone's assured, I'm being asked a question about the Cowboys. I am not talking about the Cowboys without being asked a question about them. I don't see there's any way that they can move on from Dak Prescott because, of salary cap and everything else. And I said last night, I think that the way to go in all this, speaking of turning the page, they've had the same offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, for like 5 years now. He was there before Mike McCarthy got there. They're still running basic offensive concepts that go back to the Jason Garrett days, very simple things. There's nothing, they're not the Eagles. They're not the 49ers. Like, they don't have their offense that is distinct and different. They're doing very basic vanilla things that I think are pretty easy for opposing defenses to read. I think that if Dak Prescott, they're not going to move on from Dak Prescott, and the only way that they can ever get over whatever hump, which I honestly don't think is ever going to happen as long as Jerry Jones is still alive. So let's, just put that out there. But I think the only way they're going to get over that hump, they need to turn the page and do something different offensively now. They need a different set of eyes and different minds working with Dak Prescott. Dak has to be better than he was this year, especially in the big moments. And I think the only way to do that is to have a different offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach with him. So that's my answer to that.
I can't give a better answer than what you just gave, my friend. You're closer to the action.
Cowboys anyway. So.
I mean, you're closer to the action than me. I don't want to say I don't care, but
Derek wants to know if Penn tolerates gambling addictions, Vince.
I mean, addiction is a very strong word if you're referring to me, my friend. I don't know that in my contract it says anything about gambling. So I'm going to mosey on my merry way on that one.
Yeah. John says, ask Jesse the previous question, and Jesse is going to go all in on Dak. You don't have to worry about that. I think that's what John is referring to. Skytown says Cooper Rush. I mean, Cooper very basic, but he did, when it comes down to it, play better than Dak, I think, this year, even though the offense, scored a lot of points with Dak. And then We Are Not Marshall wants to know my thoughts on the last play of the Cowboys game. Look, last play is the last play. I mean, it wasn't going to score a touchdown anyway. It was obviously supposed to be lateral, like
right.
Al Stanford, whatever. I didn't get too worked up about that. I was more ticked off about the couple boneheaded plays Dalton Schultz made before that by going laterally out of bounds instead of having his momentum going forward out of bounds to stop the clock. Instead, the clock kept running because he, was not going forward, going out of bounds. And then, of course, not getting his foot down on the last one either. So, yes, it's another player I would like to see gone in Dallas. Is Dalton Schultz. Like, if you're going to ask me who I definitely want gone next year, it ain't Dak. It is Dalton Schultz is at the top of the list. Just draft Michael Mayer. All right, well, that's going to do it for tonight. Appreciate everybody. We had some great questions.
Yeah, we did. We could have gone for a lot longer, actually.
I know. All right, so hit that like button if you would before you leave. I don't believe we've got a show tomorrow because I've got a women's basketball game over at Notre Dame. But, of course, we will be back with the Rapid Fire show at 5 o'clock on Friday. So look forward to seeing you then. And we'll talk to you then. Thanks, Vince.
See you.